welcome to another installment of Bleeding Cool Chatter, where I gather a bunch of my writers in a chat on Skype and make them talk about things. My name is Kaitlyn Booth. I'm the head film writer here at Bleeding Cool, and this time I am joined by Bill.
Hey, I'm Bill Waters. You can catch me online at BillRW3. I write TV, film, and whatever Kaitlyn tells me to.
Yeah. Really? Okay, what do you got, Ray?
Ray Flook, television beat writer for Bleeding Cool. You can catch me on Instagram at OldManGeek and on Twitter at OldManGeek88.
And Adi.
Adi Tantimedh. I write the Look at Moves column for Bleeding Cool, and you can find me on Twitter at Look at Moves.
Nice. And you can find me at Twitter at Katie's Movies. We just finished up a discussion that was supposed to be 15 minutes. That was not 15 minutes about our favorite movies of the year. But this time we don't need to break stuff down into two different genres to talk about, because we're going to talk about our favorite TV shows of this year. And I can't think of anybody better to kick off our favorite TV shows than our TV writers. So, Ray, by all means, please start us off.
Okay, I actually have one main but two honorable mentions. So we're going to start with the honorable mentions first.
By all means.
One is a shout out to a show that's been chugging along and is still as beautifully tasteless in season 12 as it was in season 1. And it's been renewed for 13 and 14. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay.
I have to respect any show that All in the Family I loved back in the 70s. But after a while, they softened Archie Bunker up. He no longer became the symbol, what he was supposed to represent. He became the nice guy. They're as lousy of human beings in season 12 as they were in season 1, if not more so. And yet you can't stop somehow rooting for them and really wanting them to kind of succeed, even though you want to kill them almost in every single episode. So lots of love to It's Always Sunny. The other is True TV, which has become the little network, the little engine that could. The Chris Gethard Show was on for about 10 weeks on Thursday nights live at 11 o'clock. He started off literally in the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York City, went to cable access, went to basic cable, now onto True TV. It's just what I kind of imagine if somebody gave me a cable access show, I would do. Have my friends, have fun, have a good time. You're not going to be crazy a-holes about stuff or anything, but you're going to have like a live cam on the street so people can like kiss the person they're with and find out how their date's going and stuff like that. It's a nice change of pace, and it's a nice feeling of like home on a Thursday night live. It's just different from the other stuff. But my number one, top of the line, big one, stars American Gods. The diversity of the cast alone and the subject matters that they cover. First off, the fact that they just cover levels of sexuality that network television is still scared to cover. You know, it functions on so many levels. The one thing I would recommend if you ever need to be convinced about American Gods, Orlando Jones, Mr. Nancy, his scene, and I believe it's the second episode where he is lecturing the slaves on the boat about how anger can be one of the best weapons you can ever have. That scene alone should sell you on the entire season. American Gods, I'm concerned because second season, and it looks like Michael Green and Brian Fuller are really gone, not contractually fighting it gone. But again, it's worth it. The first season alone was just, it could have been wrong on so many levels, and it actually improved on the book. And I rarely say that, but it improved on the book in a number of instances.
I keep meaning to watch that show, and then I don't. I'm sorry.
No, that's please.
I know you love it. I have a couple of friends who really, really love American Gods. I don't know why. I watched the first 2 episodes and I couldn't really get into it. I got kind of bored. I'm sorry.
It's one of those that by 4th, 5th, you will appreciate 1 and 2 a lot more.
It's probably one I should just sit down and binge, and I'll probably do it someday when I have free time. But then again, I still haven't watched Stranger Things. So anyway. Yeah, this is why I don't run our TV section.
Yeah,
what about you, Bill?
American Gods, man. You know what? It's one of those, I really appreciate it. I like it. I think it is definitely an improvement over the book. I had never read it, and so I watched the episodes, got done with the season, and then Marianne had suggested, so I'm like, okay, so I picked up the book, and I'm like, people like Neil Gaiman as a writer? Really? And I was mystified, because it's mostly he writes much more in the fashion of a scriptwriter than of a novelist. At least for me, it wasn't. The story itself was. For me, he set up very much a interesting mythos and world, but the main story arc, I actually like where the series is going and how it's kind of fleshing out various things. I love Dead Wife. Her and her pet fly is my favorite. I like the expanded role that Leprechaun's got, and how they're working with him. So I actually like where the series is going. I'm just wondering about if it stays to be popular, what are they going to do? It's not a very big book. So they can't really, where are they going to take it further, and how are they going to deal with various characters that have very distinct, the main arc of the book only goes a certain spot. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it next.
Well, I actually have an answer for you on that, Bill, because when the one thing I actually lucked out when I was doing the media coverage for it before the season started, that was the question I got to hit Neil Gaiman with. I was like, are you afraid that when success brings success? Are you afraid you're going to be George R.R. Martin? That the television series is going to start accelerating above where you went. He seems confident in the sense that they have already spoken about where he had already envisioned American Gods 2 going.
Right.
He does admit it has lit a bit of more of a fire underneath him, but apparently from what he's claiming, he's mapped out a general idea of where they should go through a potential half of season 3. So at least I'm hoping he's bought himself a little time, because you're right. Otherwise, Starz is going to have to go the HBO route and just start carving out its own direction.
Right. Which is what I kind of expect that they're going to have to do anyway, because one, barely 300-page book is not going to cover multiple seasons for very long. They can only stretch that so thin. But again, they were already kind of implying more threads and more plot lines that they can. And you've got a whole pantheon of deities. They can do all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's more going to be, once they finally do go off the reservation, can they keep the interest level up? And can they keep it compelling? Or will they shard it like some series do when you have too many named characters and you diverge off into little side plot lines? Sometimes they're not really as catchy. So we'll see where it goes. But good choice for this year.
Yeah, they bought themselves a lot of time by slowing the book way down, because the season is only the first 30% of the book. So it looks like it'll take them at least 3 seasons to cover all of the first book anyway, and he hasn't written book 2 yet. So they can always do a bunch of things, like the fact that Anansi Boys is part of the same universe. So they could actually cover Anansi Boys as part of the show, for example. Speaking of which, the radio adaptation of Anansi Boys is playing this week with a Game of Thrones star in it on BBC Radio 4, so you can stream it for the next 30 days. But I think it does improve on the book in a lot of ways, because it makes Shadow feel like a more dynamic figure than he is in the book. The problem that I had with the book is that it has a lot of really interesting themes and ideas and characters, and Shadow, the main character, is the least interesting one in it.
He's not. He's not. He's more like a floating viewpoint than really anything of any particular depth or interest.
Yes, and it expands on Dead Wife, because Dead Wife is barely there in the book. In fact, you could think that the presentation of the Dead Wife is a little dubious from a gender point of view, because she's just this character who cheats on him and then dies and comes back and seems to be defending him. She doesn't seem to have a character in the book, whereas in the show, one of the things they did in slowing it way down is that you get to see things from her point of view, and she becomes a fully developed character. You see that she's not necessarily a good person, that she suffers from depression, and she's self-destructive. None of which is in the book at all. Suddenly she becomes a really interesting character to follow in the show that she never was in the book, for example. So there is all of that, and I better stop talking, because I'm all set to spoil something. So.
But I wanted to follow up on that. It's interesting because from the book standpoint, Laura was the character I hated and had the least interest in, and then seeing Emily Browning get gone, the episode that's strictly the backstory of Laura. If that's not just an episode you submit for award consideration, I don't know what is. But Bill, you did make an excellent point in regards to concerns, because if I had one thing to say against the season, I found the episode where we got the backstory about Mad Sweeney. I loved it as an individual episode, but in the context of the series, I thought it brought everything to a dead stop.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I got a lot out of it. And again, love the performances, but that would be the one glitch I would say about the series and its run was like, I would have liked to have seen that add a little bit more.
Right.
Nice. Like I said, it's on my list of shows I really need to watch, but
Yeah.
Okay, and I totally understand why you tried to watch the first 2 episodes and couldn't get into it, because they felt almost static apart from the really good parts like 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 Mr. Nancy and the slave rebellion part. That was as part of the entire series, because given that you don't feel that much forward momentum in the plot in the series and the book for that matter. So it basically inherited a central problem from the book. So what Brian Fuller and Michael Green managed to do was to make expand everything to make them as interesting as possible before they tried to get the plot going in the series, which I think was a pretty creative choice that they had, given that they knew that there was a structural flaw in the book, which is a flaw that's very difficult to get through in a visual medium.
all right. Like I said, I'll watch it someday. Maybe. Hopefully. I should probably watch Stranger Things before I do that, because I get yelled at for everybody for not watching that yet. Anyway, Bill, you're our secondary TV writer here. What's your show of the year? And if you have any honorary mentions, please feel free to share those as well.
Honorary mentions, not Twin Peaks.
We have a hate episode coming up. I figured I would get to hear you and Ray yell about Twin Peaks some more. We'll get there. Be positive.
Fair enough. I was going to throw over in the positive for the film side, say, Mother, just to watch your expression. But there's what I was looking for. Awesome. But as far as her best TV series for me this season is a series that just wrapped up, completing its 4th season on AMC, Halt and Catch Fire.
Oh, yes. Really, Marianne has made me want to watch this show.
It is the show that, it is the best show that pretty much nobody watched at all. And it is a bunch of wonderful characterizations. It is all about failure. It is about, or even better, it's very much clutching defeat from the mouth of success. Time and again, it's a 4-season story about 4 individuals who are progressing through the rise of the PC and the internet age. The first season is during the PC era, then the internet era, and then kind of the rise of the web era, and the last season the search engine era. And so they're all kind of going along, and they go in and out of each other's lives, and it's fascinating in that, being someone that kind of came through that era, being in part of the tech industry, it very much captures what the different eras were like. And it is because they have these people that are being successful in, like, for example, during the PC era, they can do well and they can be becoming successful, but they can never really become the number one company, for example, because Dell was there, HP was there, Compaq was there. So it always has a built-in limiter that something has to end up happening to prevent them from doing it, because they very much exist. Their mythos isn't in an alternate reality where these people existed. It's pretty much this reality, and they totally could have operated within the constructs that they give themselves. But it's emotional. You get come to care for these people. Lee Pace, as one of the leads, is absolutely marvelous in his role. Really, Mackenzie Davis as Cameron. Other favorite leads. But again, if you haven't seen it, if you only catch up on a 3rd or 4th season, it could come across a little bit on the melodramatic side, because it very much is about the relationships between these people as much as anything else. And there's some episodes that do kind of sidetrack a bit for 1 or 2 episodes, but the main thrust and arc of the series, it's definitely the series of the season for me. As far as honorary mentions, there's a lot of interesting stuff being done and experimented with. The Americans is still a series that's ongoing. Legion, again, we kind of had all gotten drained out with, all right, another CW show, or oh goody, we started out with Netflix going, oh my god, Netflix can do no wrong when they're doing their Marvel series, and then or not. And then it suddenly becomes, well, and that shiny penny becomes very less shiny, and then comes Legion, where especially in those first couple of episodes, that they are just batshit crazy.
I'm so excited for season 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming along. Again, Glow, another good series that kind of cropped up on it. Stuff. There's stuff happening on really most of the networks other than the big 3 or big 4, really. There's just not a lot of they don't ever kind of go out on a limb. Not that television studios, like movie studios, really are known for their bravery, but they've got to see the writing on the wall that the things that Amazon is doing, the Man in the High Castle, their other networks, they have got to get off their butts and try something to really bring in some better viewerships. Really, otherwise they're just playing a delaying game at this point.
Legion is fantastic and was actually one of my honorary mentions as well. I'm excited for season 2.
The interesting thing about Legion is that I spotted a lot of places where it was influenced by a Japanese movie called Tetsuo.
That movie, I think that series was influenced by everything.
But there were like specific images that were influenced by Tetsuo. There were certain rhythmic things like the way it cuts things, the way it frames certain images, the way it has Aubrey Plaza's character suddenly look batshit crazy. Her look is even taken from a woman who goes batshit crazy in Tetsuo as well. I suddenly spotted this. I'm like, oh, okay, so these guys are taking from very interesting places for this show.
What about you, Adi? What was your TV show of the year?
Okay, my top TV show of the year is...
And any honorary mentions as well.
Oh, I have a few honorary mentions. The reason I picked Twin Peaks as the top TV show is because it is David Lynch doing one big fuck you to conventional television. It's not conventional television.
Watching you too.
To me, he did it, Adi. To me.
Yeah.
I'm watching Ray and I'm watching Bill's faces right now. Keep talking, please. I'm just gonna watch.
It's like an art installation. It's almost like an encompassing almost every aspect of avant-garde American independent filmmaking and just stuck it into this show. It also has a whole bunch of interesting themes. And I don't have any sentimentality about the old show, about the whimsical soap opera plots that everyone at all. So I don't have a problem with that. I just found it exhilarating the way that David Lynch just does his own thing. At the back of his mind, he knows what people are expecting, and he's just totally ignoring it or just stamping on it because there's something else that he wants to convey. There's something else he wants to say. There are a lot of themes that he wants to pull right to the front that were kind of pulling away in the old show. That he turns into surface stuff. And that to me is what's truly interesting about it. And it's also his own commentary on American culture and what's going on in the cultural violence that he's explicit about, like that hilarious dark comic sequence with Jennifer Jason Leigh and Tim Roth, and how that ends up in this ridiculous road rage shootout. And that's pretty much that's like a short film in itself, where David Lynch is kind of proving that he can do what Tarantino and the Coen brothers do himself. He just doesn't choose to do it until he feels like doing it. And the way that everything is about evil and disappointment and failure. Actually, failure seems to be an overwhelming theme in a lot of the more interesting movies and TV this year. So Twin Peaks is also very much about failure, and it's about time passing, and it's about people, and it's about friends, it's about people that you love dying and going away, and whether or not the world is going to stay the same once they're gone. And so that to me is what makes it interesting. And also the way that he stretches the television medium to the absolute limit of viewer tolerance. I had a girlfriend who tried to watch it, and within like the first 20 minutes of the first episode, she was screaming, "Turn it off! I don't want to see it. It's making me hate television. Turn it off now!" What else is going to get that kind of reaction from anyone this year? That's what makes it really interesting to me. And but then any honorable mention is like a lot less weird or crazy. Like, I found that the new show that I love this season most has been The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, because it recreates New York and this particular time in New York, and also the culture of stand-up and the kind of political and social climate at the time, and the idea of having this feminist show about this Jewish American princess housewife who slowly becomes a stand-up comedian and who's going to become famous. Not to mention that it also has Lenny Bruce fanfic in it, where Lenny Bruce is actually a prominent figure whose shadow is cast over the whole show. And the writing and the dialogue is just great. But Rachel Brosnahan, she's just amazing playing this character who just can't help being a comedian. That's her real calling in life, just while trying to be the perfect housewife at the same time, until her husband is so immature that he leaves her and her life falls apart. And that turns her into a comedian in spite of herself. And there's a whole bunch of other things going on, like Susie, played by Alex Borstein, who's the club owner, who's lesbian but isn't touched upon. And the heart of the show becomes the friendship between the two of them, where Susie becomes a manager, trying to get her gigs. And the real subtext is the fact that Susie is totally in love with her, and neither of them realizes it. And that's something that runs through the whole show. And so there's a whole bunch of things running throughout this whole show that's going to carry on into the second season, which makes it really interesting. And let's see, in terms of runners up, there's The Good Place, which is again the most subversive sitcom on TV, because it's like trying to teach you morality and philosophy 101 while being a comedy about people who died and are stuck in hell, where the demon is trying to torment them by making it seem like they're in heaven, but secretly trying to torment them, except that now they're onto him. And in a way, it's almost like a kind of comedy remake of The Prisoner at the same time. So that's really interesting. And a Taiwanese HBO show called Teenage Psychic, which is almost like...
Talked about that before.
Yeah, although I don't think we were officially recording at the time. But I'm the only one who's seen it, and it's only streaming on the HBO app rather than broadcast. And it's about the 16-year-old high school girl who's a little antisocial. She doesn't have too many friends, and that's because she's psychic. She talks to dead people. And so she basically grew up in a temple where the guy in charge of the temple, who's also an exorcist and a priest, has kind of raised her to kind of deal with exorcisms and to talk to people. And when people come to give money to the temple, she helps them communicate with dead loved ones. And she also feels a responsibility that whenever there are ghosts around, she might actually need to help them move to the other side. And it's done in a way that's totally the opposite of cheesy, because we're kind of used to things like Buffy, where you have everyone being hip and you have these fun, smart, savvy genre references and jokes. Whereas this one just takes it completely seriously, and it feels more true to life. It's like, she's not going to become a superhero. She's a 16-year-old girl, and she doesn't want people to know that she does this, because everyone's going to think she's a freak. And when it happens, that totally happens. But the other interesting thing is when she tells people that there are ghosts here, and this being Asian society where the supernatural is considered real, people don't go, "No way, I don't believe you." Everyone immediately says, "Oh shit, there's a ghost. What do we do now?" And she's the only one who knows how to do it because she's been trained. And it just has really great moments, because she's this surly, slightly grouchy teenager who wants people to leave her alone and who doesn't have that many friends. And she plays it like that, and it feels incredibly true to life, including instead of those kind of faux precocious hip teenagers that they try to write in Hollywood shows. And there's this great moment when there's a politician who's also a gangster is asking her for advice. And she's just a teenage girl, and you can tell that she's like, "I don't really want to be here. I don't even know what I'm doing." And he finds that his political opponents are like leaving talismans and pieces and finishes that are curses to try to basically put curses on him. And she found the curses for him because a ghost told her where it was, and she dug it out of his flower pot. And he says, well, thanks. Can you tell me how I can strike back against them, head at them? And she looks at him and says, "How should I know? I just talk to dead people." So it's just that, and it's about her falling in love for the first time and making friends. And it's just a 6-part miniseries. It's totally self-contained, so it's well worth watching if you ever find the time. But the way that it does it, it just has an approach that you haven't seen for this type of show before. So those are my 3 top mentions this year.
Nice. All right, my honorable mentions. 1, everything Bill said about Legion. Everything that's already been said about Legion. I love Legion. My second one, I haven't watched as much TV this year as I wanted to, but I really, really ended up enjoying The Punisher way more than I thought I would.
Yes.
Out of the 3 Marvel Netflix series, if you had asked me which one I thought I would enjoy the most, it wouldn't have been The Punisher when I asked me at the beginning of the year. But my TV show of the year, the one that I cannot and will never shut up about, is Mindhunter. I love Mindhunter. That show is just pretty much perfect. I can't think of anything about it that I would change, honestly. It takes the genre that we all know about, you know, the serial killers and all this stuff, but also just imbues it with this really interesting angle that somehow is even more disturbing despite the fact that it's not gratuitous. I was recommending this series to my parents, and my dad especially is very weird about what he watches sometimes. He finds some shows on Netflix to be too much when it comes to gore and violence and stuff like that. He's worried he's going to become numb to it or something. I'm not really sure. But I told him, I was like, look, Mindhunter is disturbing, but it's not gratuitous and it's disturbing. It doesn't glorify violence. There isn't a moment where we go back and we have to watch someone get brutally killed. But it's still disturbing because it just focuses on the faces of these serial killers as they're describing this horrible, horrible stuff that they've done. And it doesn't flinch. The camera doesn't look away. It just looks dead on as you hear Ed Kemper talk about decapitating his mom and fucking her head. And it's just even more disturbing, despite the fact that you're not actually seeing anything. The most disturbing parts of that show are, as far as like gore and violence go, are a couple of crime scene pictures, and even then, the camera doesn't linger on them. The camera doesn't, like, you don't see much of anything. And just all the characters are these varying degrees of being good people, but also kind of being terrible people. And the Holden Ford that we have in episode 1 is not the same person that we get by episode 10, but at the same time, the change is so perfectly spread out between 10 episodes that while it's an extreme change, you're still like, okay, yeah, I see how we got here. I see how we got to this horrible, horrible place that we're at. We see how this person has fallen so far. And I can't think of very many series where episode has ended and I've gone, okay, where's more? Where? Now. And the fact that I might have to wait for any amount of time for season 2, just, I want it now. I want it now. That was amazing show.
Kaitlyn, let me ask you this, because now that you mentioned that, I can't think from this past season any more natural character evolution than Jonathan Groff's Holden Ford. I just, and you're right, it was so extreme, yet there was not a moment through that entire season where you go, no, it made the natural sense. It was, again, I think the best character development of 2017, hands down. You hit it right on the head with that. Absolutely.
It's just it's subtle, but it's, at the same time, it's so subtle in the changes that by the end you're like, well, that came not out of nowhere because I saw it coming, but at the same time, like, if I tell people, I'm like, when you finish episode 10, go back and start the series immediately again and go, holy crap, look at the difference between this human being. It's like 2 completely different people, but it's not. But it is. But it's not. And it's just, Netflix puts out a lot of good stuff all the time. That's their magnum opus as far as I'm concerned. Like, I love that series. Love it.
And so much of it is also just slyly, darkly funny.
I know. It shouldn't be funny at all. We're talking about the formation of the word serial killer and real people who killed real people, and why am I laughing? It's like, again, dark comedy. I love dark comedy, and there were moments of Mindhunter that definitely fell into dark comedy. Have you had a chance to watch that one at all, Bill?
I have not.
All right. It's 10 episodes. It I know everyone always tells me this about Stranger Things, and I swear to God, I'll watch it eventually.
No.
But it's a pretty
Don't.
easy 10 to get through. I think
Yeah.
I marathoned it in 2 days, and it's not one of those shows where it's oppressive, but it's not like I need to take a break before I go and hang myself. It's like it's a good oppressive. It's an oppressive where you're like, I don't mind that I feel like there's a bunch of whale blubber sitting on my shoulders. I'm okay with you, whale blubber. Let's keep going. And it's the show I recommend to everybody now. I'm like, got Netflix? Go watch Mindhunter now, and then come and talk to me about it because I want to talk to people about it. Any other shows that you guys saw this year that you would like to recommend to people? TV writers in particular?
There's, again, it's been a good season just for various,
Yeah.
various sorts. And, you want to have fun, pull the pin on the grenade, roll it into a room with a bunch of Star Trek fans and go, okay, Discovery or Orville? And just watch them rip each other's faces off. And, we haven't had that much of a cross battle since the days of Kirk versus Picard. And the results being similarly pointless because, both series are fine. It really all depends more as to what you take as being your Star Trek. And, some people that went with either original series or Next Generation being their first introduction to Star Trek, they'll tend to gravitate towards Orville. If you're a DS9, fan, then it oftentimes, but not always, you'll go towards Discovery. The weird-ass design of the Klingons notwithstanding. But beyond that, it's kind of like, it just depends on when you got into Star Trek as to whether it's my Star Trek. It's hard to have a pretentious claim like that when there's, 6 different series if you include the animated version. So there's a whole bunch of different types of Star Treks to claim from. There's... a bunch of really accomplished, short-run series. Limited series is becoming more popular these days, though it's probably somewhat disingenuous because more often than not, it's kind of more of a modern version of a backdoor pilot where they'll throw a long-form miniseries out there and kind of going, all right, do we have enough stuff? Because when they first threw out the, coming back of X-Files, they're like, no, we're just doing it for one season. No, you're not. You're seeing if you get enough ratings, then you'll do it again, and they are. But so they all, they'll come back around again. So again, it hasn't been a bad one. It's just the networks need to step up their game because otherwise, someday they're going to have to answer why exactly Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is still going on.
I haven't watched that at all this season. I really liked last season though.
Yeah.
That season was we get into this season. I don't really like the storyline this season.
Yeah.
Show that is chugging along that deserves more ratings that is probably going to get canceled this year. Brooklyn Nine-Nine. If you're not watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. You want to talk about representation? Rosa Diaz just came out as bisexual. We have a canonically bisexual woman on TV. And she's a woman of color. Oh my God. It's like the writers of Brooklyn Nine-Nine are like, well, we're probably getting canceled. Let's just check every single thing off the box and just go with it.
The Crown is another one that's good, but again, it's somewhat of a niche audience that's really going to get into it. A series that is not necessarily as good as all the hype, but it is really, really solid. However, it goes into the freakishly timely category as Handmaid's Tale, just because it's just kind of horrifyingly on point. Americans continues to roll along. They've only got one more season, which really kind of sucks because the leads in it really should have gotten some nominations a couple of years ago, and now the show is a little bit on its ebb, but at least they've got its wrap up coming on.
I gotta say, if I had to take a big takeaway from this year, and I'm using Preacher as the example.
Right.
First, second season of Preacher, I think exemplifies one thing that surprised me this year is that basic cable just doesn't seem to give a shit anymore. And I mean that in a good way. Like, American Horror Story Cult dropped more F-bombs than close to what I hear Wolf of Wall Street. I was surprised. Preacher is going in directions that I never thought AMC would ever let them go in those directions. And also taking the graphic novel and making Jesse a little darker. Making him not quite the heroic nice guy like he was in the graphic novel. I was concerned because first season was so much build up to get them on the road, but they sure as hell got them on the road. I'll say that. And they ended it very, very strong. If nobody's watching Preacher yet, catch up on that thing. It's definitely worth it.
And I would also recommend Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which is another incredibly
Yeah, it's another show that's probably going to get canceled.
Yeah, well, it feels like where the story is now. I don't know how much further it could possibly go now that she's finally had attempted suicide and had all her bullshit laid out in front of her and had an official diagnosis for her mental disorder. So a lot of it is that her kind of crazy can't really go on for that much longer, even though the rest of the characters will have their own stuff. But then she has a mental illness. It was always a show about a woman who has a mental illness. And yet it manages to be hysterically funny at the same time while being completely merciless, but also incredibly insightful about mental illness and emotional dysfunction and love addiction and all those things, while having fantastic musical numbers at the same time. But,
that's a show I never ever thought would still be going. When that show came out the first year, I was like, there's no way this is going to hit. But, the thing that Crazy Ex-Girlfriend has going for it is it's on CW, and the CWs, as far as their standards for keeping a show on the air, they're not that high, and they don't have a lot of shows that they can actually point at and go, this has accolades. So that's why a lot of people right now are worried about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and Jane the Virgin. I don't think either of them are probably going to if they got canceled, I wouldn't be surprised, but if they don't, I also wouldn't be surprised.
Because I think it's the lead actress for Jane the Virgin. I know her production company just signed, I think, 3 different series into development, and she's been talking a lot about wanting to spend a little time in that direction. So yeah, that doesn't.
Gina Rodriguez, I believe her name is.
Yep.
My guilty pleasure shows are still both on Fox, and they're still The Gifted, and they're still Lucifer. I don't care. I'll give me my slightly crappy superhero shows and comic book shows. I don't care. Whatever. I enjoy it still. I need to catch up on both of them. I'm behind from before winter break, but I still enjoyed both of them thoroughly.
Confession's good for the soul. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing.
One thing that'll be interesting coming into next season is going to be the impact that everything that's going on in industry right now to several, flagship series. What are we going to do with House of Cards? These are shows are.
I really hope that House of Cards just kills him. I've never watched House of Cards, but I know a lot of people who are really invested in it. I just hope they make Robin Wright Penn the lead and just kind of go, we're done. Yeah. He got assassinated. We're good. Yeah. And then she's just a lead, and I'm like, cool, awesome. Go on for another 10 seasons, please.
But make it honestly be like, oh, yeah, he had an unfortunate aneurysm while on the toilet. Like, make it something embarrassing to get rid of Frank so you can just wipe the plate clean and roll along.
Yeah.
Oh, man, aneurysm on the toilet. That would be amazing. Oh, my God.
Yeah, something
you need
like
to tweet that of the House of Cards account.
Spoiler for the original British version. In the final series of the original British version, the twist was that his wife had him assassinated. So I've been expecting that to happen in House of Cards, and it looks like they're going to write it where he dies off screen between seasons, and then she becomes the lead of the final season. That's what I've been hearing.
I'm fine with that. I love Robin Wright Penn. Give her more accolades, please.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but it'd be funny if the twist of the final season is that she had him assassinated so that she might do whatever. Maybe she becomes president. Who knows?
Cool.
I wouldn't even want to give his character importance like that, though. That's my only thing. I would love it for her character development, but I just think at this point, Frank should just die a very inglorious way. Like slip on the soap in the shower. Something like that. Or the aneurysm
fall out of bed.
He's talking to us. That'd be great. Force him to have to come back and film 10 seconds. But there you go. That right there, that should be on the Twitter account right there. And that scene, by the way, your reenactment should also be captured in its own GIF, just so you know.
Will do.
Okay.
Just so.
Duly noted. Let's tell our boss to GIF me again, because that was not a weird thing for me to see the first time. Anyway, we still have more segments to fill, so we should probably wrap this one up. Bill, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at BillRW3.
And Ray, where can people find you?
You can follow me on Instagram at OldManGeek.
And Adi, where can people find you?
Look at movies.
And I'm on Twitter at Katie's Movies. And look for more TV and movie stuff coming from all of us in the new year. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for joining us.